we're going to unpack a profoundly esoteric and honestly just fascinating philosophy. Today, we're exploring the ideas of Joseph Benner, specifically as they're communicated in his classic work, The Impersonal Life. But we're going to look at it through a very specific, very striking lens, the concept of divine shards. If you've ever felt like you have an inner life, a spark, a soul, or just a quiet sheepfold of reflection inside you that isn't really tied to your physical body, well, this explainer is going to give you a pretty remarkable framework for understanding exactly what that is. Okay, let's just jump right in. With Benner's foundational, authoritative declaration, he says, "Be still and know I am God." Now, I want you to imagine for a second that this voice isn't booming down from the clouds. Imagine it's actually your own innermost, true self speaking directly to your conscious human mind. Benner is basically challenging us to quiet our busy intellects and realize that the very core of our being is inherently divine. It's a massive, bold starting point, but it sets the stage perfectly for everything we're about to cover. Section 1. The Divine Shard Within. So, to truly understand this inner I am consciousness that Benner's talking about, we have to ask, where does this spark actually come from? Well, we can think of our souls as divine shards. They're literally fractal pieces of absolute divinity. Think about how human DNA works, right? Your hair, your fingernails, just a single cell in your body. Each one contains your complete genetic code. In that exact same way, as a divine shard, you reflect all of divinity. You are a piece of ultimate unity, which Benner also equates with love. That unity, that love, is the foundational building block of the universe. Now, while we have access to all divine knowledge, we really only hold and retain a tiny portion of it at any given time. We've never actually left that ultimate unity, but we are experiencing a very focalized, specific piece of it. Section 2. The perfect soul body. If we are this pure, divine energy, how on earth did we end up walking around in these physical bodies? There's a really stark contrast here between the absolute perfection of our immortal soul body and the flawed, mortal vessel we're currently inhabiting. See, we've been gifted this perfect container, the soul body, and that creates the perfect illusion of individuality. But to actually reach incarnation in the physical world, we had to take on a mortal body. And this mortal body is an imperfect, fleshy reflection crafted from the dust and clay of what Benner calls the real earth. It's imperfect simply because it exists entirely within a realm of illusion. Let's trace how this descent actually happens. We start way up in a state of absolute unity in eternity. Then we descend into the celestial Edenic state, which is where we reside in that perfect soul body. And then finally, we move all the way down into the physical clay of mortal expression. So it's a journey from the boundless and eternal down into a highly specific, restricted, and physical realm. But here's the really important part to remember. The whole time, through that entire descent, that divine shard remains perfectly intact at the center of it all. Section 3. Prisms of Mortal Personality. All right, so now that we've descended into the mortal realm, we obviously need a mechanism to interface with the physical world, and that brings us to your personality. Your personality is basically the combination of your mortal body and your mortal brain. It's an imperfect reflection of your soul body. Our divine shard actively crafts our personality from the imperfect clay of the earth. So yeah, it will always be an imperfect utensil, but man, it's an extremely useful one for our mission. Our divine shard uses our personality to act as a prism. It takes the pure, unified light of the divine and breaks it into distinct individual colors so we can actually interact with the world around us. Now, Benner introduces this really fascinating concept. He describes the human intellect as a clouded lens, or what he calls the mist of the intellect.
Because our personality is so heavily influenced by human desires and our physical senses, it acts as this veil over our soul consciousness. This mist literally distorts the pure light of the divine, making us temporarily forget our true nature. It creates the illusions of time, of space, and, maybe most importantly, the illusion that we are separate from one another and separate from the divine. We end up seeing things darkly, like looking through a thick fog, and we mistake the shadows of the physical world for true reality.
Section 4. Projecting your divine attribute.
So, despite this misty illusion of separation, and despite the clumsiness of our mortal personalities, our shard has a very specific, very profound job to do while inside this prism. Out of literally an infinite number of divine attributes, you have the honor of reflecting just one specific shade of love into the world. Think of it exactly like a rainbow. When pure light hits a prism, it breaks into all these different colors. Well, you are one distinct shade of that cosmic rainbow. That is your divine attribute, and your mission is to project it. You're meant to act as a lantern of faith, shining your specific light for others who might feel like they're stumbling in the dark, and then mixing your light with the light of other divine shards around you.
Section 5. The universe's giant painting. Let's zoom out for a second and look at how all these unique shades of the rainbow work together on a macro level. Like, what's the ultimate point of all this projecting and mixing of light? Well, we have purposefully disassembled the full unity of the divine into these fractal shards for a pretty magnificent reason, so that we can try new combinations. It's kind of like a giant set of a child's interlocking construction blocks. We project our individual shade of love, we interlock our projections with others, and together collaboratively, we are discovering and creating a giant painting the size of the universe. You are painting a tiny, absolutely vital part of that cosmic canvas simply by being your unique shade. I want to pause here on a concept that I find incredibly reassuring. Even in misalignment, the shard is always projecting. Even in the dark, the light is always shining. What that means is every single moment of compassion, of clarity, or of courage you experience, whether you generate it yourself or you receive it from someone else, is simply a divine attribute shining straight through the prism of personality. Even when we make mistakes, even when that mist of the intellect completely clouds our vision, the light of the divine shard never actually goes out. It is always there, constantly pushing to express its perfection through you. As we wrap up this explainer, I really want to leave you with a thought to chew on. I want you to look inward at your own lantern of faith. Look right past the mist of the intellect. Look past the daily imperfections of your mortal personality. And just ask yourself, how are you uniquely illuminating the world around you? What specific shade of love is your divine shard projecting into the giant painting of the universe today? Keep that question in the back of your mind as you go about your day. Thanks so much for joining me on this journey through the impersonal life.